I've been telling everyone that I really like new water. Yes, and last
Hello.
year I was quite obsessively thinking about new water. Um, but I realized in the summer a major part of what I was missing is when the whole water purification process is happening, like a lot of sludge is generated, which is then converted, like incinerated, converted to ashes.
Just, oh,
We're both anthropologists.
yeah. You sound
No, you
cool.
just
You sound
try
cooler as
the-
anthropology. No, I think next time there's a documentary. I need to interview the public health sector.
Oh,
Definitely.
yeah, you can.
Now fine. Okay, wait.
Sure, let me know.
Yeah, later then. Fresh. You're good.
We're good.
You're good. Let's say night. You're good in the frame.
Oh, I'm good in the frame. Can folks on
Why is
YouTube hear me? Is it
Is that too much or there's only
Why
one?
is
No,
it?
there's
Why
only
is
one.
it
So we
slanted?
share.
Yeah.
Then don't need to.
Yeah,
the other
okay.
one.
Okay, then I think you don't need that.
Do I not this one? Just talking there.
Yeah,
All
we'll
right.
have to repeat the question.
Yeah, I can't change the. Never mind. It's okay, right?
It's
Is it
alright.
okay?
My mother thinks it's driving my mother crazy, but it's fine. I think.
What do you mean?
She's
No, I
watching
think
on YouTube now.
projector is like.
You can see this slanted,
Yeah.
but it's fine.
Yeah, I start recording it.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
I'm good for now.
Hello? Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. So, thank you and welcome to Wild Conversations. And yeah, everyone order your food. So, yeah, so what is Wild Conversations? So, it is a time where we speak about topics related to sustainability, the environment, and we invite a speaker who will speak about their topic of interest. And usually, we get the speaker to pick an organization of choice that he would like contributions to go towards. And today, he's picked
El Nido Marine Turtle Conservation. The El Nido Marine Turtle Conservation Network.
Yeah. So today we'll be speaking about that topic and contributions will actually go towards that. But first of all, we'd like to thank our venue partner, Nude Seafood, for lending us their beautiful space. Thank you so much. And we would like to thank our tech crew that's all around here. I think you'll see them all over. Thank you so much, guys. And so while Wild Conversations is a free to attend event, we typically collect contributions for this organization, so the El Nido Marine Turtle
Conservation Network.
Conservation Network, that's right. And also if you'd like to make a contribution towards Wild Space, you can do so. I'll pass a piece of paper around soon when I find it. It's one sec. It's just here. It's all there. Yeah, so Kelly will pass it around. Okay, so let me start by introducing our speaker. I think some of you know him personally, but for those who don't, we have with us Rushan, a sea turtle biologist and a PhD candidate with James Cook University, working to protect sea turtles over the years. He realized that scientific tools and methods alone are insufficient. It requires weaving the understanding of local communities, their traditions, and weaving that together with science that will help the preservation of these sea turtles and their habitats. So before we start, we'll start off with a quick quiz that we will put up now.
No, it's fine. Sorry, let me sort this out.
Okay, just give us 1 sec to connect.
No, I got it. Oh, there we are. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do
Do
this
this
one.
bit.
All right, we're gonna. Daphne had requested that we do a little quiz, and I think it'll be really cute. If you can go to www.kahoot.it first, and then after that, you just put in the game pin here. So that's kahoot.it, not kahoot.com. It's kahoot.it. So if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and go to kahoot.it, and then put in this pin over here. I wonder who this is. That was really fast. Really showing your age here. All right, we got Jazz, we got Gems. Who else we got? Tanya, Max. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If there's anyone on YouTube, I'm going to give you about 20 more seconds to get in. That's kahoot.it, and the game pin is 766-3401. That's if you just want to take part in the quiz. You don't have to take part in the quiz. Don't worry about it. Okay, let's see. We got Ian, Tanya, Max, Jens, Jazz, M, Ming. Okay. Oh wow, that's a lot of people. Well done. Is that a lot of? Is that folks on YouTube? Wow, look at that. Okay. All right, let's see. How do I start? I actually don't know how to start this quiz. Oh, it's the button that. You know how you start? It's with the button that says start.
Okay, I'll hang on to your mic.
Okay. No, it's alright.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna start. Okay, I'm gonna give you another 10 seconds, folks on YouTube. You got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're gonna start. Okay, Kahoot. Go on. Turtle time. 3. Okay, the first question is, it's a multiple choice question. How many species of sea turtles are there? Are there 17 species, 4 species, 8 species, or 7 species? Actually, don't know how many. Is that everyone's answer already? Everyone put their answer?
No, if everyone has answered, you'll just automatically.
Oh, it'll automatically? Okay.
Yeah. So,
Well,
but then if there's a countdown, then
hey, y'all can't be checking online, you know. All right. Hey, folks on YouTube, I know you all got multiple windows. Okay, so
Don't cheat.
don't cheat. That's it. We're done. Okay. The answer was the green one, which was 7 species of sea turtles. A lot of people used to think it was 8 species of sea turtles. Some genetic works has indicated that there's only 7 species of sea turtles. Okay? And where's my next button? Okay, here we go. Okay, we have Charmaine in the lead. Well done, Charmaine. That's not fair because you actually attended some of my classes. So, all right. Okay, second question. What 2 species are commonly found around Singapore? Is it the green and hawksbill turtle? Is it the hawksbill and loggerhead turtle? Is it the loggerhead turtle and Olive Ridley? Or is it Raphael and Michelangelo? Tanya, why do you look so stressed? Are you actually going to smash the green one? Go on. 10 people. All right, come on. Last it. Ba, 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 ba. Okay, a lot of people put the red one. Yes, the 2 species that we commonly hear around in Singapore are the green and hawksbill turtles. The hawksbill turtles are the ones that we see on the news that are nesting up on Singapore, and the green turtles are the ones that a lot of people usually see when they're out in the water. They don't nest in Singapore because our fake beaches are all too shallow for them. They like deep, deep, deep beaches. The green turtles are usually the ones that wash up dead on our shores as well, unfortunately. Quite sad. Okay? All right, and we got one more question. And who's in the lead? Oh, of course, Charmaine is in the lead. Okay. Last question of the night. What's the largest species of sea turtle? Is it the loggerhead, the leatherback, the greenback, or the flatback? Go on. Largest species of sea turtle. Largest species of sea turtle. When you see this sea turtle, you're going to be like, good lord, that is a big turtle. You'd never think anything could get, like a turtle could ever get that
Oh,
big.
we have some comments from YouTube.
Yeah, come on, what's the comment?
Kahoot is glitching.
Is it glitching? Oh no! Is it glitching? Who's it glitching on? Is everyone else okay here with Kahoot? Yeah. Oh, then it's your problem, my man, sorry. For those of you watching on YouTube, sorry. Okay, yeah, correct. Number 4, the leatherback turtle. The leatherback turtle is the largest species of sea turtle. A lot of reptiles are actually ectothermic, which means that I think that's the right word. They're cold-blooded creatures, which means they need to bask in the sun to be able to warm their bodies and increase their metabolism. Leatherback sea turtles are so large that that even though they're reptiles, they're able to generate their own heat, which is quite amazing for sea turtles, for reptiles.
How heavy can they get?
How heavy can they get? You're asking me the wrong questions, man. I'm in ecology, not a biologist. I think anywhere up to 900? Oh, 900 kilos.
So that was the oldest, the recorded oldest.
Oh, Charmaine is number 2. Who's number 1? Drum roll, please. Ba-da-da-ba-ba-ba. Gems. Who's Gems? Hey, there you go.
Oh, brilliant.
You disappointed me.
What's going on?
Okay, well done.
Well done.
Well done. Okay, that was a bit of fun. All right. Okay. So thank you all for coming to my talk today. This is today is what am I doing? Let me move over there. Okay.
We need to get in line for the camera.
Yeah. Daphne, could I have you tap on it
Yes,
whenever I need
sure.
you to?
Yeah.
Whenever I need to go. Okay.
Can you go next?
No, not yet.
Oh,
So thank you all for coming to my talk tonight. I know this might not be how you want to spend. Was it day today? Thursday evening. But if
The
you
only
enjoy,
day that doesn't exist in the
right. So thank you for coming out and being nerdy with us. Today is going to be a little different from the previous talks that I've given. I usually give talks that are very ecology focused, but this one is a little. This is kind of where a lot of the work goes into to try to make sure that sea turtles are conserved. So help me hit the next slide. So as Daphne has said, my name is Rushan. I started life off as a sea turtle biologist. When I got into university, I got a little bit nerdy and decided to pick up mapping and statistics. And a lot of my work throughout after university, particularly with the Olive Ribbon project as well, is satellite tagging sea turtles and using spatial statistics to figure out which parts of the Indian Ocean they use. So that we can figure out what are some areas that we need to protect. I have kind of shifted gears a little bit currently with my PhD. It's still a very spatial ecology, nerdy, stats-heavy thesis, but the very last chapter is a really large incorporation of people and social sciences. So we'll go into the next slide. So the next slide has a few there, Daph, so just keep your finger ready. Okay, so I'm gonna fire through this, just talk a bit about the life history of sea turtles. So all sea turtles start their life in the beach, in the sand. Depending on the species, you're looking at about 180 to 120 eggs per clutch, except for flatback turtles, they only have about 50 per clutch. So the next slide, the next one is what happens after about 2 or 3 months is that the hatchlings will come out of the sand, and then they'll go down the beach, and then they'll be engulfed in the water. And we call this stage the swim frenzy. So at about this time, the only thing that's really pushing them is the egg yolks that they absorbed while they were in the clutch. Right? So they'll go on for days out in the open ocean to try to get some open ocean current and just take them out somewhere else to what we call the surface pelagic phase. And the surface pelagic phase is just a fancy term for they live out in the open ocean at the surface. What they're looking for are rafts like this. In the Atlantic Ocean, these are sargassum rafts out in the Sargasso Sea in the North Atlantic Ocean. So these are like ecosystems amongst themselves. So you get lots of larvae fish, lots of larvae crabs, and turtles will basically eat anything that fits in their mouth. So they'll eat as much as they can and just grow and grow and grow and grow. But once their energy demands are too high for these sargasso rafts, they will what we call recruit or migrate back into the near-shore environments. In science, we call that the neritic phase, the neritic habitat. So these are usually where a lot of people see sea turtles, right? So if you go out into the corals, into the coral reefs, about anywhere between 5 to 40 meters, where there's coral, where there's seagrass, this is where you're going to find a lot of sea turtles. So sea turtles will be here once they get about 80 centimeters to a meter in shell length, and this is where they'll start to go into their ecological niches. So hawksbill turtles that we get here are what we call spongivores. They eat sponges, and that's good for the coral reefs because it removes sponge from the coral and it allows other species of coral to settle and grow. So it increases diversity within a coral reef, right? So after depending on the species of sea turtle, something in their minds will tell them that they need to go back to the beaches from whence they came. And this is when they start their breeding migrations. So here we have 2 sea turtles celebrating Valentine's Day a little early. And they will head back to the beaches that they came from, and they will mate around or near the beaches over there. There's a lot of really interesting science about this. There's some evidence to indicate that female sea turtles are able to compartmentalize and hold sperm from the previous nesting season. So the males that mated with them the year before, they'll be able to use that sperm to fertilize their eggs, and they can lay those eggs in the next time. And then after that, they will come back onto the beaches and they will nest. This is a really crap photo, but this is a flatback turtle on the beach, and I did it with red light because I didn't want to disturb them. So sea turtles, because sea turtles are marine animals, red light in water is the first light that kind of disappears. That's why when you go underwater, what we see is kind of like this kind of drab blue kind of color. So if you add a filter, a red filter to your cameras, that's when the colors really pop, because you're adding the red back into the footage. So the red lights are actually the lights that probably don't disturb sea turtles that much, right? So these nesting turtles, when they come back up onto the beach, they'll try to go to the beach that they were hatched from. And you might hear this thing where, oh, they go to the exact same spot on the exact same beach that they nest on. Not necessarily so. So the green turtles in the Indian Ocean, if they come from Brazil, they're going to go over to Ascension Island, which is basically just a grain of sand in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. So their accuracy has to be really on point. But when you're looking at the loggerhead turtles on the east coast of Florida, their nest site fidelity, that we call it, is around 100 to 150 kilometers, right? So long as they're within 150 kilometers of where they hatched, they're perfectly happy. If you're 100, 150 kilometers off Ascension Island, you're gonna miss it by a mile, right? Okay, so the thing about the life, so what I really wanted to point out here is that sea turtles live in a lot of different places throughout their life history. So the nesting beach may be in one country, and then their foraging grounds may be in a completely different country. And then they also, when they're growing up a few years, they live out in open oceans. So there's quite a lot of habitats that they cross into, and because there are so many threats within each of these habitats, these threats can compound, right? And that's why sea turtles are quite vulnerable to human threats, because they're not facing threats from just one habitat, they're facing threats throughout many different habitats throughout their entire life. And this is really something that we see with a lot of large marine megafauna, the big animals within the water, so especially migratory ones like whales and dolphins. So there's lots of different ways that we can protect them. And one of the ways that we can protect them is with area-based solutions. Area-based solutions are basically things like your marine protected areas. We find a spot in the water to protect. We'll create a demarcation around it and say these are our protected areas, right? These are marine protected areas. You've heard about them, MPAs. They come in a lot of different flavors. Singapore has our own MPA, Sisters Island Marine Park, the first marine park that Singapore has ever had. And that's where they're having the sea turtle hatchery. It's on Small Sisters Island, right? So this is actually the West Bintan Marine Protected Area, which opened up in March, which was gazetted and signed into effect in March or April of 2022. So I got to visit this MPA with my donor's office, and it's pretty nice. So you can see that the green is basically mixed use area, and then the red areas are basically no-take areas, and anything that's white is unprotected, right? So this is what we call zoning, and this is actually a very important part of developing a marine protected area. So let's say that we have this hypothetical set of islands out in the middle of ocean somewhere. So then you would get a nerdy spatial ecologist like myself. They would put a tag on a sea turtle, do some fancy math, and then they would find that the sea turtles are concentrated in this area. We can't just go and say protect this area, right? Because it's not just sea turtles that live within these areas. The area is being used by governments, the area is being used by local stakeholders, right? We need to consult with them and try to figure out, like, is this going to work for you, right? So sometimes they may come back to us and they'll say, can you not take these areas, right? Because maybe the government says we use this for military. The local people may use some areas for their fishing, access to fishing grounds, so that they can get money and send their kids to school. Or they might say, can you not take this area because this area is of cultural importance to us. It's very important for my family. So there are a lot of these values that we attach to space, right? But it's not the end of the world, because sometimes we might get areas that they look at and say, oh, you missed out these areas over here. We know that there are sea turtles here. We're not interested in those areas. You can keep that. So then what we end up getting is a protected area that looks very different from what the nerdy spatial ecologist would have generated before. And this is really how we generate a marine protected area that is cooperative, that works for everyone, so that it can benefit both sea turtles and socioeconomics and livelihoods. And so this is not something that I necessarily just pulled out of thin air. This is actually very well researched. This is it's a bit old, but it's actually quite good. So it's from 2016. And what they did is that they looked at about 177 published articles that looked at 165 protected areas around the world, which included marine and terrestrial areas. And there are very important findings that they got from this. One of these important findings is that protected areas that had socio-economic benefits were also very likely to have positive conservation outcomes, right? So that's very important. In fact, socioeconomic benefits was a very good predictor into how well conservation outcomes was going to be. Every time you get positive socioeconomic benefits, you always get positive conservation outcomes. The second thing is that socioeconomic benefits were more likely to happen if you were to have sustainable use of protected areas rather than stricter protection. So what that means is that you might have a protected area, and what will happen is that some governing body might say, no one is allowed in here, you're not allowed any activities in here. Full stop, period. You can't do anything here, right? And that actually had very poor conservation outcomes. And the reason that it had very poor conservation outcomes was because there was no local buy-in, and there's a lot of clashes there's a lot of conflicts with the people that actually live around those areas. Those people get displaced. So it really brought up the question, are stricter protections necessary 100% of the time? It's very important for areas where high poaching where poaching pressure is very high, but most of the time where it's not, is it really that important? Do you really need 100% protections all the time? And what they also found was that protected areas needed to have 3 hallmark characteristics. You needed to empower local people. So what that means is that you don't have this kind of centralized governance of a protected area where it's only all by the government. There had to be some co-management with the local people, right? So the local people first of all, had to have a say in how these areas are protected, and they had to have some kind of authority to be able to protect these areas. It improved cultural benefits, so that means it allowed the people to continue living the way that they did without those livelihoods being impacted, and of course it reduced the costs on their livelihoods. Can people still go out, use the natural resources, harvest natural resources, sell it, and still send their kids to school? If you can do that along with the other 2 characteristics, your protected area will work socioeconomically, and you will have positive conservation outcomes, right? So what this indicates is that biodiversity conservation is not necessarily just about the thing that we're trying to protect. A lot of the times it's about people, right? And there's a lot of things that we need to consider. So one of the things that when we're doing our biodiversity conservation, we cannot displace people. Absolutely not. It's unethical, it's immoral. It's a very helicopter science, colonial science kind of thing. That's not something that we want to do. It's not really that different from when colonial powers came to our country and displaced us, took the riches and then brought them back to wherever they came from, right? We don't want to do the same thing to Orang Asli, to indigenous people, right? We don't want to say this area needs to be protected. For the good of biodiversity, you all need to get out, right? So this screenshot was something that was taken from Twitter, now X, but basically it just goes on this conversation about decolonizing biodiversity, decolonizing conservation, and really looking into making sure that local livelihoods are protected is a discussion that's been happening for a very long time. But it was only within the recent couple of years where this kind of thing has kind of kicked in a lot more, right? So one of the examples that I want to talk about is vaquita conservation. Oh, yeah, just went off a bit. Okay. So one of the things I want to talk about is the vaquita. So the vaquita is a species of dolphin over in Mexican California, right? There are only 10 individuals left. And the problem with that is because they always get caught in gill nets, right? And why are there gill nets being put out in these areas if they're illegal? And the reason they're being put out is because fishermen want to try and catch not that fish. That's not the fish we want to protect.
Oh, sorry.
Whoops, it's good. No, don't worry, Dad.
Okay.
Here, I got it. We're good.
Sorry, not so good with tech.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. We're good. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this fish is called the totuoba. So the swim, it's not the actual fish that's really important. What's really important is the swim bladder. These get sold in traditional Chinese medicines. And the cartels pay a huge price for this. And the market for this is actually much more lucrative for this than drugs, which is why the cartels are really interested in this kind of thing. But within this country, Mexico, what they did is that they ended up doing is that they really did conservation with an iron fist, right? So they got the Navy involved, they got the Army involved, they saw gill nets in the water, they got rid of them. There were very harsh penalties for using gill nets. They went around to try to find whoever had gill nets and got rid of them, right? But the population kept decreasing. When I first gave this presentation with this slide back in, I think, 2018, when you were still in poly, I think, there were 50 vaquitas. Now there's less than 10, right? So what was the problem? The problem was that you had a whole bunch of fishermen who didn't have anything, whose only livelihoods was to catch the totuoba, right? And they were doing it the only way that they knew how. And when you have a people where their livelihoods are displaced, when someone else comes in and they show them an alternative livelihood, they're going to take it because they need to feed their families, they need to send their kids to school, they need to live. And who were the people that came in and rescued them in their time of need? It was the drug cartels. Drug cartels came in, they had very deep pockets, they bribed a lot of the politicians, and suddenly you didn't see very many Navy folks or Coast Guards out in the water. And worst of all, the drug cartels were the ones that managed to convince the local communities to get rid of the conservationists. So a lot of them had to flee to try to save their own lives, right? So this whole thing, vaquita conservation is a really complicated thing. It's very hard to try to figure out how we can try to conserve the vaquita with drug cartels involved. How do we make sure that local livelihoods are protected and not involve the drug cartels, which are very powerful? This is a question, and there's no single blueprint that we can apply to any country, to any locality. It's going to be different from every country. The most important thing is that we look at a lot of different skills. So if we look at what ecology is a bunch of all these things: stats and geography, animal biology, plant biology, etc. So then if all of this is what we would consider to be ecology, if we wanted to look at what conservation was, conservation is actually a multitude of a lot of other different things: sociology and psychology, business and economics, policy and law, trying to understand how different industries work, bringing them together, and working together to try to figure out how we can actually do conservation, which is right there. Okay? And that's kind of the focus of what I wanted of the spiel that I was going to have today. That conservation is not just biology, and the direction that I'm going in is basically sociology and psychology. So what we're going to see now is basically, where is it? Up. Okay, let's see. I think it will cycle. We'll just see if it cycles. I'm not sure if it will.
Okay, I can click it.
No, it's fine, it's okay. No, because these are meant, let me do this again.
Meant to.
Yeah, it's meant to. Sorry for the folks at home. Okay, let's see if that works. Let's just start with this one. Okay. So hopefully these slides will just cycle through. They should. Oh, it does. Excellent. Okay. So I guess we can go to the Daphne if you want to.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think a couple of us will have many questions about conservation and what it really means to us. And maybe before I ask my own questions, I'll put it out to the floor to see if anyone has comments or questions for Rushan before I set off.
I encourage questions, so please go ahead. Oh, there we are. Yeah, Tanya.
What are some reasons why turtles are going extinct?
What are some reasons? So there's quite a number of different threats. So one of the biggest ones that we're, specifically within Southeast Asia, one of the biggest things that we're worried about is fisheries bycatch. So what bycatch basically means is that you might go out and try to catch, you want to catch a specific kind of fish that you want to sell to market. But because the techniques being used are all-inclusive, you're going to non-selective, you're going to catch a lot of things. Sometimes sea turtles are going to be caught in those nets as well, along with a bunch of other things like whale sharks, dolphins, some whales, like lots of different species, right? Non-target species. So if you're talking about bycatch, it's basically a species that's not part of your target. So that's one reason why sea turtles are going extinct and they're not looking great, particularly within our region. The other reason is marine debris, right? So marine debris comes in a lot of different flavors. So the ones that we're quite concerned about are plastic. So what we found, what some researchers have found is that young juvenile sea turtles, because they will eat anything that fits in their mouths, and they need to, because you need to eat a lot of things so that you can grow up fast, right? Sea turtles, they'll eat anything when they're super young, right? And they can't differentiate between an organic creature, organism, or a synthetic plastic bag. So because they eat anything, juveniles and neonates and the young hatchlings are the ones that are at most at risk of death by plastic ingestion. So when they eat things, so they'll feel full, but there's no nutrition going in, and that plastic doesn't digest. So they basically starve to death. That's the first thing. Or the plastic just pokes holes in their stomach, and the acids just eat their flesh from the inside out. So that's very sorry, YouTube. So yeah, yeah. So that's pretty grim. I think another one is climate change. So what we're seeing with climate change is a couple of things. We're seeing a lot of stronger storms. So what that's doing is that it's wiping out a lot of the beaches, a lot of these nesting beaches. So what we end up getting are now beaches that are way below the high tide line, and sea turtles won't nest below the high tide line because if the waves go over the nest, that nest is dead. End of story, done. They need air they need air going through their shells so that the embryo can live. So if the tide goes over it, they're dead, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is sea turtles, they're all reptiles, their sex is determined by the temperature that their eggs incubate in, right? Females you get more females from a nest if it's a hotter nest, and you get more males if it's a cooler nest. A very old sea turtle biologist told me a very easy way to remember this. Cool guys, hot chicks. A very easy way to remember it, okay? It's a very old timer. So what we're seeing now with climate change is that a lot of the nests are producing mostly females and not a lot of males. So if you were to go out into the water, and you see turtles, most of them will have a very short tail. And that's an indicator that they're either subadult, they haven't reached sexual reproductive age, or that they're female. What we're not seeing are a lot of turtles with very long tails, and the turtles with long tails are the males. So it always breaks my heart whenever I see a dead turtle and it's got a long tail, because that means that we already have very few males to begin with, and that's another dead male that is not reproducing and contributing to the next generation. So eventually what's going to happen is that there's going to be a lot of females. We're going to have 100% females in the population. There's not going to be any males anymore. And what the turtles have done now is just inherited what we call an extinction debt. So that means that there's still turtles in the population, but if they're not reproducing, once the last turtle dies, that's it. We're done for. Not we're done for, turtles are done for. So, yeah. Sorry, Tanya, that was a very depressing answer. Yeah, you asked the sad question, man. I was going to give you the sad answer. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think with climate change, it does affect a lot of these turtles. Does it affect their navigation skills as well? And actually, I have a question about navigating like, do they obviously have a GPS that they carry with them so that they can go to the same beach again and again? Is that why they can move from places to places like that?
Yeah. Yes. So actually, a lot of migratory animals, folks have found that they do have some kind of biomagnetic mechanisms within their brain. And there was a very interesting study done, I think it was published in 2018, and I thought this absolutely blew my mind. So what they ended up doing is that they found quite a lot of nests out in the wild. So from each of these nests, in the very late stage of incubation, what they would do is that they would take out one egg, a couple of eggs, and they'd rip it open, basically killing the embryo. But what they were doing is try to figure out the orientation of that turtle. What direction was it facing, and was there some kind of significance? They did this for quite a number of nests. All turtles face north or south. Magnetic north or south. Not true north or south. Magnetic north or south. So previously, we used to think that the process of the turtles coming out of the nest, going down the beach, going over the water, was very important for imprinting. So they use all of those cues to try to figure out how are they going to get back to the place that they were nesting in. What we now know is that this imprinting starts as early as incubation. So when you have climate change cooking these eggs, basically cooking the eggs, you know, is it going to affect this biomagnetic mechanism? We're not sure, but because the turtles are going to get cooked anyway, so, you know, what are you going to do as well? Sorry, Daphne.
No, that's all right. But
Just ask a question, I'm going to fix this.
Okay, yeah. No, I think it's really interesting because I've always wondered, why do the turtles, like, how do they know the moment they hatch to run into the sea, right? Because clearly they can run the other way if you say they face north or south. Yeah, so is it because they are magnetically drawn to the ocean? Is that why?
I don't know why this is failing on me.
Yeah.
All right, so when they come out of the nest and they want to try to get to the water, there's a lot of local cues that they'll look out for. One of these local cues is to look at, what do you call it? So when they come out at night, it's believed that what they'll do is that they'll look for the reflection of the moon on the water, right? So when they come out, they're bleary-eyed, they can't see anything. All they see is just the light that's on the water, and then they will head down towards the light.
Do they only come out at night?
Sometimes, because it's a lot cooler at night. A lot of the predators are not around, and that's why they would rather be coming out at night, right? So what's good about that is it's cooler. They're not going to cook while they're on the beach. There's not a lot of predators. Not going to be eaten. Problem is with human development, there's a lot when we have like really nice beachfront houses. People have a lot of lights, and it's the lights that will overpower the moonlight on the water, and that's what's going to pull these sea turtles back inland. So from the early 2000s, mid-early 2000s, there was a lot of news reports of sea turtles in Singapore. Like the rollerbladers were noticing that hatchlings were showing up on the beach. So what they did was that they picked up the sea turtles and tried to put them back into the water, right? And it's entirely because East Coast Park is very well lit up, right? And all that light is going to draw the sea turtles over into the land. So, yeah. So it's not biomagnetism, it's just local cues.
Yeah.
What is like the single most impactful thing that people can do to, I guess, impact or to improve, like to help conservation efforts for sea turtles and conservation in general?
So what's the single most important thing for people to kind of help conservation and conservation efforts? Tough question.
No, there's actually, this is very hard to do in Singapore. And it's a little tongue-in-cheek because we're in a seafood restaurant. Is reduce your seafood. And the reason, and there's a reason for this. It's not that all seafood is bad, right? When you go to the market, or if you go out and fish, pole and line, that's actually not bad, because I know it's non-selective, but the thing is that you're catching just one thing and bringing it out. It reduces the likelihood of bycatch. So maybe you catch one fish, maybe you catch two fish, three fish, that's enough for your family, you got a big family, 4 or 5, right? And then that's it. The problem is commercial fisheries, the big trawler nets, the big gigantic cities on seas, right? So these big things, so we've come a long way from what trawling used to be. What would happen is that you have a huge catch, you throw it into the hull, and then after that you have to come back to land and then offload all your fish. But now you get these giant trawlers that are basically like a city, right? So you can catch all the fish, you can process the fish so that you get rid of all the bones, you fillet the fish, you can freeze it. So now you can stay out in the water for longer and you can catch more fish. And if you're in areas of water where where there's no regulation, like these big trawlers that are out in high seas, you don't need turtle excluder devices where if you get bycatch that goes in, they can slip out through the nets, right? So, and these are all that food that you get within seafood restaurants, particularly within developed countries, where the concern is to try to allow the market to continue in their economic system and compete, businesses competing and stuff. The business is always to try to compete with the cheapest product that they can get. And when you get the cheapest products, there's usually a lot of environmental injustice that's happening, and as well social injustice. And that's where you get things like slave labor on ships and etc. Right? So that's something so the best thing that you can do for conservation efforts with marine turtles is to try to reduce your fish intake. If you're going to a place where you are going to get fish, maybe within a local community, supporting artisanal fishers is great. You support artisanal fishers, these are fishermen or fishers that go out into nearshore habitats, they catch fish, they sell fish, it goes back to their families. They can send their kids to school, they can take care of their spouse, they can support their home, they can take care of their homes. Great, fantastic. You want to go out and catch your own fish? Fantastic. And not just for marine habitats, reducing your fish intake is great. For terrestrial protection, because the marine and land environments are all connected, for the land environments, reduce your meat intake, right? Or grow your own food. That's the only, because the thing is that if you reduce your meat intake and everyone goes vegan tomorrow, you're always going to get one guy that's going to be like, you know what, I can use a whole lot of pesticides, I can get a huge yield of crop, and then I can sell it at a cheap price, right? Grow your own food. If you can grow your own food, you reduce your environmental impact, you eat for yourself, right? But the problem is you reduce economy. There's no generation of economy, so that's the problem. So, but you want to make an impact, reduce your meat, reduce your seafood.
Yeah. Okay. Go for it. Yeah, easier.
Let the world hear you, Sherman.
Yeah.
Hi, Rushan.
Oh God.
Okay, so I have a question. So there are a lot of organizations now that are promoting freeing the turtle hatcheries,
Yeah.
especially in Bali. So they promote this as like a way of conservation, of saving the turtles. So I want to know, what do you really think about it? Because there are so many things, so many conservation activities now that are being promoted as like, this is good for the environment when it is not. So is this also the case? Like, what do you think about all this kind of activities?
So that's a really good question. So when we're looking, and I won't talk about Bali so much, but I will talk about Terengganu a bit. So the thing about Terengganu is that turtles have always been used as a source of sustenance, not the actual meat, but the eggs, right? So, and what people used to do way back before World War II, and where there was not a lot of road infrastructure, people would eat sea turtle eggs for sustenance. After World War II, when road and transport got a lot better, what you ended up seeing is that people were able to take sea turtle eggs and sell it at the market. And what that ended up, so then there was a shift in how turtles were used. It wasn't so much as sustenance livelihood, but more of economic livelihood now. So with access to markets, there were lots of fights on the beaches of like, this is my beach, these are my eggs, right? So there was an act, the Terengganu turtle enactment, where now all the beaches had to be bid for and tendered for so that you could get access to these eggs. So long story short, what would end up happening is that this Terengganu turtle enactment shifted from turtle consumption to turtle conservation. And there was a shift in the people as well. So people stopped consuming turtles for food or their eggs for food, but it started to become more of a tourist attraction, right? Not just for overseas folks like us who go to Terengganu, who go to places like Perhentian Islands, or who go to Redang. It's also for local people. The problem now, and we, instead of trying to sell eggs, we have a lot of people that are going into tourism. So the problem now is that there's quite a lot of tourism operators who are doing things with turtles just to try to get people to come onto their boats. So they're feeding turtles, they're taking turtles out of the water. So I don't know if like a couple of years ago you saw that there was a turtle taken out of the water in Sabah and put onto a boat, and then like they told the child, you can sit on the turtle, it's fine. It is absolutely not fine. I cannot emphasize how not fine that is to sit on a turtle, let alone take it out of the damn water and put it on a boat. Sorry, I swore. Anyway.
That's okay.
All right, we're casual. Okay. So, what we have generated is the success of conservation. People are looking at turtles not for livelihood, not as a livelihood value, but as an alternative livelihood value, and that's a good thing. But now we need more regulations to regulate tourism operators to make sure that they're doing it in an ethical, moral, and with animal welfare in mind, right? So that's one of the problems. So what are my thoughts on that? I think in the large scheme of things, from where we were before and where we're going to now, I think it's great that we're shifting how we're using turtles. But more needs to be done with regulations to make sure that turtles are used in a proper way, and that there are licenses and etc. to make sure that turtles are not going to be impacted badly. Okay? Does that answer your question, Charmaine? Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
You were saying that the law of the sitting on a turtle is not fun.
No.
What is the impact on the turtle if this is
Stress. Okay, so the question is, what's the impact of taking a turtle out and sitting on it? It's stress. It's absolutely stress, right? If I were to take you and throw you in the water and have an octopus hug you for about 10 minutes, right? You'd be freaking out, right? That's Tanya's worst nightmare, right? And the thing is that you may not want to go back to that area, first of all. And a lot of animals are actually a lot more, not as resilient to stress as we are. If you stress out the animal a lot, it's okay, maybe that one time, the animal is not going to be that stressed. But if people see that and nothing is done, people are just going to keep doing it. And you're going to get a lot of turtles that are very stressed. When you're stressed, you release a lot of cortisol, a hormone called cortisol, and that's the stress hormone. Cortisol, when you have a lot of it in your blood, reduces your immunological activity. That's why when you're stressed at your corporate jobs, that's why you get sick all the time, right? And that's exactly why, because your immune system is suppressed from all the cortisol. So a lot of animals, if they're stressed out, they're going to get sick a lot more. And that's not what we want. So when it happens, you need to nip it in the bud so that it doesn't become a systematic thing, right? So that one individual, maybe that one time, it'll recover, it'll get over its trauma, it'll go for therapy, it'll be fine, right? You keep doing it over and over again, that's when we're going to have a problem, right? Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah, I think with most tourism, like especially when we go to places, especially in Southeast Asia, if they offer you like a ride on an animal or for you to pet a wild animal, that like some red flags to look out for. I think it's definitely not fine to be able to pet or interact with any type of wild animal or be close to them. I think these are just certain things that we as individuals, when we travel, we go somewhere, things to watch out and look out for. Actually, my other question is, you've been working on turtle conservation for a while now, and you started off doing scientific studies. Not that you're not, but you mentioned that working along this route and this path took you to realize that working with communities is a lot more important than really just doing the scientific work. Could you maybe share a few stories with us with like you observing the communities and how they were using turtles in their daily lives and yeah.
I go back to Terengganu. What we're very happy about now in Terengganu, I think it was in 2022 or 2021, might have been 2022. Before when I mentioned Terengganu, there was beach tendering process. So people would tender for a beach. If they win, then they get a license, and then they can harvest the eggs from that beach, right? So there was quite a number of changes to the Terengganu turtle enactment, where if you purchase beaches, if you have a license from a specific beach, you have to sell your eggs to the Department of Fisheries, and the Department of Fisheries will put it into a hatchery, and then that'll be good for conservation, right? So and they usually did this with the very productive beaches, right? So the beaches that were hard to access or did not have a lot of eggs were the ones where you don't have to sell me the eggs. You can take the eggs from there, you can sell them at market, right? But the thing, and on paper, the Terengganu turtle enactment was fantastic. It was great, right? It went from consumerism to conservation, which is fantastic. But what was happening on the ground was a lot different, and that's nothing. And there's nothing wrong with the policy per se. It's just that usually lawmakers, what they do is that when they generate a law and they want it to, and they intend for it to work one way, they have to put it out into the wild and actually watch what happens and see how the people react. And what people have been doing is when they sell their clutches to the Department of Fisheries, they would actually not sell all the eggs. They would keep some of the eggs for themselves to sell at market, right? So that's sort of for the beaches where you had to sell your eggs back to DOF. For the beaches where you could keep all the eggs, they underreported the number of clutches that were on those nests, that were on those beaches, so that it didn't look like it was a productive beach, so that when they won the tender for that beach, they could get all the eggs for themselves. Like they could either sell it to the market or they could consume it themselves. So there was a lot of things that were happening. So the point that I was trying to make is that Terengganu was a very unique area where turtle conservation was happening, right? And with the turtle and the Terengganu turtle enactment, it was a beautiful scheme. On paper, it was fantastic. It was a very unique scheme, particularly within Malaysia, within Southeast Asia. It was great, fantastic. The problems were that there was a lot of institutional absences, basically meaning that the people that were able to make the arrests and enforce and do the enforcements were not there. And it was entirely due to human capital. There was just not enough boots on the ground to enforce it, to arrest people that were going against it. So a lot of the conservationists that worked within Terengganu to try to support DOF with what they're doing, they would help patrol beaches, or buy eggs from the people, so that, you know, DOF, their hatcheries were too full. They'll buy the eggs and then they'll put them into the hatchery, right? One of the problems was that WWF Malaysia in 2014 stopped the buyback scheme, right? Because what they have said is that it puts a monetary value on eggs rather than a conservation value, and that was a huge impact to sea turtle conservation within Terengganu, because WWF had a huge amount of money, right? And they were the ones that were buying a lot of the eggs. So now all these people who were using eggs as a commercial livelihood were like, look, if there's no demand from WWF, I'm going to sell my eggs to the market, or I'm just going to keep more for myself and just give DOF, you know, not a lot of eggs, right? So that's the first thing. There was another organization, Lang Tengah Turtle Watch, and what they did is that they actually bidded for beaches, and they were the ones that would win the tender for those beaches and collect the eggs and put them into their own hatcheries, and then release the eggs. So I think the difficulty is understanding that turtles were being used for a specific livelihood, right? And it worked at the time, that there was a conservation, that there was a monetary value for the eggs. You just had to do what you had to do at the time that you could do it. I think my friend Jarina, when she wrote that paper, it's a very interesting paper. If you can find it, it's open source, so you can download it and read it. It's called "To Ban or Not to Ban," and if you look up Jarina, then it'll be there. I think the quote that she put in had something to do with about describing the Terengganu turtle enactment was. It was just, we had to make it work over time, right? We have this enactment, let's use it, let's try to make it work. And it worked for a while, but it was just really difficult. You can't, like, people needed money. Terengganu is one of the poorest states in Malaysia, and it has a lot of very poor districts. Setiau, Dungun is okay. Paka can be a bit poor as well, I think. But you had people that were very low income, that were sustenance fishers, right? So if it was good season, they could fish and they'll be fine. But when the monsoon comes, no one's going out in the water. They need the income from something else, right? So to try to figure out how to work with people who needed to live and making it work for seasonal conservation, that's very tough. I'm not a conservationist in Malaysia. A lot of my Malaysian counterparts who might be watching on YouTube, they take me as a Malaysian, which I'm very honored. But the thing is that I am not as resilient and as tough as they are. They're very creative. They're very tough. They face a lot of verbal abuse from people who don't understand turtle conservation over there in What's the Point, and I salute them and admire them for all the work that they do. So as tough as I think it is, I remember that I'm an outsider just looking at it. They're the ones that are actually they're actually the boots on the ground.
Thanks. I think that really sheds light on a lot of, actually a lot of different conservation work happens that way as well. I think struggling working with local communities and thinking that we know better because we have the science, but really, I think sometimes it's a struggle and a balance between understanding the needs of the local community and what they have been traditionally using and for years, right? The grandparents, their parents, and then now them. What do you think would be kind of the way forward, especially, I think in Singapore there used to be a lot of places that sell turtle soup, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if there still are a lot. Yeah, and what do you think in terms of the way society is moving? Do you think that's a thing that we're moving away from because we are becoming more and more conscious about what we eat and conservation of these marine creatures? Or do you think that we're doomed because we're just going to continue in that fashion?
Point of clarity as well. The turtle soup that we get, and there's still quite a lot of places that sell it. Turtle soup is, if I'm not wrong, is the Chinese soft-shell turtle, which is a freshwater species, and they are farmed. So they're very often very farmed. They're very often farmed, and that's kind of why we see a lot of these very large soft-shell turtles at McRitchie, because those are just escapees from the farms, right? Where people say, "Oh, so sad," they'll buy a bunch and then they'll release it out into the water because it's a mercy release, but then they don't realize that 90% of what they release dies on the first day. Right. So, is it kind of tone deaf to still be eating turtle soup in this day and age where turtle conservation, or rather conservation, is quite important? Personally, I don't eat turtle soup for a number of reasons. Freshwater, anything that lives in freshwater and you give it to me, I am a little bit because I think freshwater fish is gross. Anything from freshwater is a little gross. And also in Islam, we don't eat reptiles, so it's not something that I've ever eaten before. But I think, again, as you mentioned, Daphne, I think we need to be very sensitive to the cultural and local needs of the people, and that's really the kind of the onus and the kind of that's kind of the anthem that we're working on with decolonizing conservation. That we don't come in and say no more meat for everyone, no more farming of these animals, no more eating of these things. We just need to make sure that we understand what the cultural needs are of the people. What do the people need, right? And if the people need turtle soup for cultural importance, for tradition, how do we make it work hand in hand with conservation? Because if we just kind of say your traditions, your culture, your religions are not important and dismiss it in the name of conservation, you're setting yourself up for conservation failure. In order to make conservation work, you need to listen to people and work with them, address their needs so that they don't make conservation, they don't make a human impact elsewhere in their lives. That's very important.
Absolutely, absolutely agree with that. I think in Asia we consume a lot of things, turtles, many weird things, innards and all that. And I think sometimes it's also, fighting with the older generation is not going to change their perspectives and things about the way we consume, but we can make a choice. And I think making conscious decisions in our everyday lives in terms of the food that we choose to eat, how much meat we intend to reduce in our diet does make a difference. I've got a more biological question for you. I read about some biofluorescent turtles. Well, I was wondering if it was like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or what. So could you shed some light on these?
Okay. Biofluorescence, bioinflorescence. So a lot of marine animals, and in fact a lot of terrestrial animals, if you shine UV light on them, they'll glow. And it's not just that they'll glow, they'll have specific patterns that show up on their body, right? So if you ever go out at night, and Charmaine does this quite a lot because she's a nuisance to society, when she goes out and she sees a scorpion, if she shines a UV light on it, it just glows white, right? And that's entirely because there's some kind of ultraviolet visual communication that these animals are using that we're not aware of, right? A lot of marine animals do that. And it was very recently where someone kind of shined a UV light on a sea turtle and they noticed that the shell kind of lit up in patterns that they had never seen before if they had just used white light, right? So is it a mutation? It may have been a natural evolutionary mutation that occurred, and the reason it continues on with sea turtle populations today is because it worked, right? Nature is very good at getting rid of things that aren't necessary. Even as for an aesthetic, they just get rid of it, right? Because there's no function to the animal survival. So for some reason, it's functional to turtles. And the reason we don't understand it is because we might not be able to see in the spectrum that they can see. So it is important somehow, we just don't know what it is. But there's a lot of evidence to suggest that a lot of animals outside of human beings are able to use ultraviolet light or ultraviolet biofluorescence to communicate with each other in ways that we don't yet understand.
Super interesting. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just curious, how did you become so passionate about turtles?
Yeah. So tell us about your journey.
Oh, how did I get so passionate about turtles?
Too much cartoon.
No. I never actually had access to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when I was younger.
Oh.
I was one of those sad kids that heard about it but never watched it. When I was in Polytechnic, I got a chance to. We were part of an interest group that had a field trip to Tioman, where we would do a volunteerism thing at Jawara Turtle Project back then. So that was, and what they did is that they had a hatchery. They would patrol the beach for nests, and they would put it into the hatchery, and then they would release them. So that was kind of my first stint out with turtles. And fun fact, that's where my wife and I fell in love, actually, because we were Polytechnic students together there. And we fell in love on a night patrol together. And so after that, I kind of had, it was in the back of my mind, and I didn't really think about turtles after that, but my final year project in Poly was going to the Maldives. And it was really, so the way marine biologists kind of work in the Maldives is that it's very trendy for resorts to have teams of marine biologists, right? So I was attached to the Four Seasons, and they had marine biologists there. So when I arrived at the Four Seasons and my manager picked me up, Martin, if you're watching, I'm telling you this story. So he said, what kind of project do you want to do? And he asked me, and I asked him, what do you have? And he said, we got dolphins, we got sharks, we got turtles. what do you want to do? And I said, okay, what do you do with dolphins? And he said, oh, you get on a boat, you count the fins. That's really about it. And I said, okay, what do you do with sharks? You get on a boat, you count the fins, and that's really about it. And I said, wow, you're really selling it to me, aren't you? What about turtles? And he was like, oh, we got a Head Start project here. So we take turtles that hatch, we take a couple of them and we rear them to about dinner plate size, and then we release them. Tomorrow we're tagging 3 turtles. Since you're a vet nurse, you could actually take care of the turtles because sometimes our turtles get sick, so you can take care of them. And I was like, you had me at turtle. So I was out there for about 3 months, and I got to do the satellite tagging for one of the turtles, and I was the one that analyzed the data. So it was ever since then, and I analyzed the data in a very rudimentary way, and I was very convinced that if you have data in a spreadsheet, there must be some kind of way to be able to analyze it in a proper way, right? So throughout my entire university was trying to figure out how did they do that. So I took up very advanced statistics courses. I picked up advanced mapping courses, and it was from there that so every assignment that I did, it always had some kind of sea turtle twist to it. And my dream came true to combine sea turtles mapping and statistics when I had an honors supervisor, and she asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do something with stats, mapping, and turtles. And she said, I got just the project for you. Fully funded, ready to rock and roll. And I suffered for about 8 months. And I decided that suffering was not enough, and now I do my PhD on turtles. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. Falling in love with my wife, and then continuing on with that project. So turtles and my wife, that's 2 things that's high on my list here.
Is your wife also doing sea turtle conservation?
So my wife is afraid of water. My wife can't swim. My wife is really afraid of very big animals. So like cows, horses, and then the idea of going into the water, and I think she would absolutely just freak out if like a turtle came out and swam up to her. She's just really freaked out with really big creatures. So I try to not force her to get into the water. She's very supportive. It's like, I want to try, and then she gets in and she freaks out. It's like, it's just stay on land. Just don't worry about it. So my wife has continued on as a vet nurse. So we met in that diploma from TP, and she continued on in the as a vet nurse. So she's doing great. Doesn't need to go into the water, and that's fine. It's okay. I love you anyway. Okay.
Is she watching?
I don't know. Yes, question in the back.
Do you have any data or statistics to share, like how the population has dropped over COVID or the last 10 years? Trends
over COVID.
Not over COVID or whichever.
Over the years?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the data myself, but I've read quite a number of papers from our region. Green turtles are doing okay. It seems that their populations are within Southeast Asia are either growing or just stabilized, right? And that's a good thing. The problem is that the threats are still there, right? So there's still threats of bycatch, there's still threats of marine plastic, threats of coastal development, climate change. So even though they're stable right now, it just takes a moment to just tip the scales, and then after that, their population could start to decline straight away, right? Hawksbill turtles are not doing so hot in our region. Hawksbill turtles are actually one of the rarest turtles in the world. They are listed as critically endangered on the International Union for Conservation and Nature Red List of Threatened Species, the IUCN, right? So they're very rare throughout the world, and within our region, Southeast Asia, the populations are declining. So the thing about hawksbill turtles is that they eat sponges. So when you eat, sponges are very foul tasting. I've never eaten them before, but they have spicules inside their flesh, which are basically just tiny micro bones. They're very sharp, they're very unpleasant, and they have a lot of toxins in them, but hawksbill turtles can eat them, right? They're unpleasant to eat, but they can still eat it. But those toxins end up in their flesh, so people that eat turtle would say hawksbill turtles taste terrible, right? So they don't eat hawksbill turtles for their flesh. What they kill hawksbill turtles for is for their shell. So if you go around Southeast Asia and you see something like tortoise shell, and it's like this beautiful, like black and shades of brown and yellow, it's likely from a hawksbill turtle. that's what they're poached for. They poach the turtles, they take the shell off, they'll use the shell to create like ornaments, so like and accessories like earrings, hair bands, combs, keychains, etc. Yeah, so hawksbill turtles, because their shells are so beautiful, that's why they're in decline. So it's not looking great for them. We actually have a lot more species within Southeast Asia. I only know about green turtles and hawksbill turtles because they're the study species for my thesis. And I've had to read up a lot on them. So I can't comment on olive ridleys, leatherbacks, the flatbacks, the loggerheads. Yeah, I can't comment on those yet. Hopefully, we'll see. Does that answer your question? Is that okay?
Oh, I'm just curious about data. Like
Data.
trend. I know I'm sure it's been declining, but then was there a spike? What trend?
So the other part of your question, COVID, right, or something, or. Well, the thing about turtles.
Any interesting, like trends?
No, I've seen a lot. Okay, all right. Thanks for coming, Tanya. Go ahead. Okay. All right. Take care. I've seen a lot of numbers, and I can't remember them, to be honest. It's just the most important things that I kind of look out for is how's the population doing? Is it stable or is it declining? So I can't give you the exact numbers. Sorry, but I can find the papers, and I can suggest them to you. Yeah. Sorry. Kelly, did you have a question? Oh, Charmaine. Oh God. That's prevalent.
Okay, so my question is, Rushan, do you have any advice on people that are interested in working with marine megafauna, especially in Singapore?
Advice for people who want to work on marine megafauna in Singapore, or my thoughts. It's hard. I think if you want to work on marine megafauna, so when we say marine megafauna, it's any marine animal that's very large, right? So these are the things like your whales, your dolphins, your dugongs, your sharks, your turtles, your marine turtles, your sea turtles, right? The thing with that in Singapore, there's a lot of research that looks into like coral reefs, ecosystems, how do we live in a world where there's climate change, a lot of invertebrate stuff, and coral stuff, and that's because there's a lot of it there that we're able to study and we're able to publish papers out from. Marine megafauna is not really looked at very often because there's just not a lot within or around Singapore to be able to do it. National Parks kind of has a grip on sea turtle stuff, and they're doing stuff with that, right? If you are going to go into marine megafauna and you're from Singapore, my suggestion to you would be interdisciplinary, right? It's good that I know that you're starting to pick up mapping and statistics, and that's a very good thing to do with marine megafauna because that's something that we need to do. Spatial ecology. We need to do a lot of statistics. Need to do a lot of mapping, a lot of predictive modeling. So like we know where they are now, but can we predict where they're going to be in the future with climate change? That's one thing. But I am starting, as we have talked about at the beginning of this talk, I'm starting to realize that it's not enough, and that you need to start looking, if you want to do conservation, something impactful is the people. You need to focus on people, and maybe the way that you focus on people is not necessarily just with communities or working with community-based conservation. It could be that you work with policy, with law, right? And that's what I mean by trying to be interdisciplinary. So while you are a good scientist, and I know that you're a good scientist, what you need to do is to pick up something that's not a science skill. Policy, law, conservation, social science, psychology, conservation-based management kind of stuff. Economics, business, yeah, we don't have conservation finance is starting to be a really big thing. A lot of people are kind of scared of it. So like when we talk about blue carbon is kind of a hot thing. So blue carbon is where there are lots of environments that are holding, a lot of marine environments that are holding a lot of carbon in the ground or in the biomass. So things like seagrass, things like mangroves, right? Because they will sequester carbon from the sea, and then when they die, all those leaves that hold the carbon just get deposited in the ground. So blue carbon is quite huge, and people are trying to monetize it so that these blue carbon areas are protected. There's some kind of commercial value. The problem is nowadays is that the problem with these financial things is that it's very there's not a lot of security with it. People are very scared to invest in blue carbon because it's so new. There's a lot of uncertainty, and when people want to part with money, they want to know that their investments are going to be protected. It's very high risk, right? So that's another thing that you could go into, right? It's not just the spatial stuff, it's the finance stuff, the human stuff, the people things, because science is just not enough. You need to speak the language of other people to be able to make conservation happen, because no one just listens to science.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, question. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like zoos appearance? No doubt they are not the truest wild
Space.
original environment of the animals. But I mean they do serve for conservation, education purposes.
Yeah. Thoughts on zoos and aquariums.
So thoughts on zoos and aquariums. Really putting me on the spot here. Okay, so the thing about zoos, and
some of them do also say in their defense the animals survive better
yeah.
environments rather than
Yeah. So the history with zoos, right, is that you usually, again, it's this colonial thing where you get people that come to the global south here, they see like an animal they've never seen, like an elephant, a tiger, they'll capture one, ship it back to wherever they came from, put it in cages for their own amusement, right? So, and that's kind of how zoos kind of started. You get eccentric, rich, white males that, you know, wanted to show off their wealth and show off these things where they found all this exploration. After a while, people started to realize, hey, actually, you know, this is really bad for animals, you know? So then people stopped doing it. But then what happened is that the captive population for all these wild animals actually was so large and so genetically diverse that conservationists kind of came in and said, hey, we have all these animals that are genetically diverse enough, and there's so much in there, why don't we use them for breeding programs to release some of these critically endangered animals back into the wild, right? So with zoos now, with the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, there's kind of thing where no wild animals are caught anymore. All animals that you see within the zoo are traded from other zoos, right? And they're traded mostly to enter breeding programs. And Singapore Zoo actually has some impressive conservation programs. Not only do they have conservation programs, they fund a lot of people. So there are folks in Cambodia that are funded by the money that comes from the zoo. My friend Andy Ang gets money from the zoo to be able to do her conservation work within the region on primates, right? So zoos, I think, have come quite a long way from that eccentric collection, menagerie collection of animals that they have, right? Aquariums are about 50 years behind. They're about 50 years behind zoos in terms of being able to stop taking things from the wild, right? So there's still, like, for some of the larger animals, like maybe, I'm not sure, but like otters, you get otters in zoos. You can trade an otter to get it into your aquarium. And you can breed fish and put them into your aquarium, right? But there's still quite a lot of animals that are wild caught. Dolphins, right? That's the big thing that everyone wants to talk about, the dolphins, right? And it is an issue. There are ethical issues, there are moral issues, right? So, for example, with killer whales, the thing about killer whales is that they have a very complex and tight social network within each pod, right? And if you were to remove individuals to put them into the aquarium, that network starts to break down, right? So, and it can break down to the point where the pod just breaks up. And especially when you lose the matriarch who knows where the fishing grounds are, when you remove the matriarch, or when you remove some of these individuals, it has a disproportionately large impact on that pod. So even though they might say things like, "Oh, we're just taking one or two," then it impacts the whole thing, right? for some places where they say, oh, we're taking the whole pot, so you know it's not going to impact them. There are still issues. There's still ethical issues as well. Social intelligent animals are very difficult to keep in captivity, right? You acquire quite a lot. They require quite a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Enrichment, right? A lot of stimulation, right? When you have a captive bred population, that's their life. They don't know what it's like outside. They're well fed, they're well taken care of, and it's true. Animals in captivity do very well. They can live maybe 10, 20 years more than animals in the wild because they don't have vet care, they don't have the best nutrition that's out there. They live in an environment where they're not being chased by other animals. They can just, they just lounge. So when you go and see the lions at the zoo, they're just kind of like, and it's like, oh, boring, why don't you guys fight? The point is that they're happy. That's it. Just leave them alone. That's a happy animal, right? If I were lounging, if I were fed, 3 times a day, I didn't have to pay rent, I'd be happy too, right? I'd be as happy as these animals. So the thing with, okay, back to aquariums. I'm done with my bit, sorry. So back to the aquariums. So the thing, there is a push for aquariums to catch up with where zoos are. And so a project that is run in Raja Ampat, Reshark, Nisha, I'm looking at you. They release captive bred leopard sharks back into Raja Ampat. And these captive bred, and the thing about leopard sharks is that they breed like crazy. So like when you give them like fantastic living environments, they just like breed and breed and breed, and they just lay eggs. And there are lots of aquariums in the world where it's like, I got more leopard sharks than I know what to do with, right? So they had to work with quite a lot of aquariums to try to find out which individuals from which aquariums had the genetic identity of what they had in Raja Ampat. So, and they would breed them, ship them over to Raja Ampat in Indonesia and release them. So that's a really big step that we would like to see more with aquariums, right? And to contribute back to conservation for the sake of conservation rather than a PR stunt, and to stop taking animals back out from the wild. Will they get there? I think so. And the other thing about aquariums and zoos is that, and this is a society thing as well. You have to understand that not a lot of people will have the opportunity to see animals in the wild. So what zoos and aquariums do is that it brings those animals to the people who don't have that opportunity. For some people, that's the only wild animal they'll ever see in their entire life, ever, right? What better way to do it in a controlled environment where you can basically create an environment to educate, where you can control it, right? It's an ethical thing. It's not fair that I get to go and, I get to see a turtle every day. You know what I mean? Maybe my nephew wants to see a turtle. Maybe, maybe my wife's family would like to see a turtle. Maybe the only way that they can do it is with an aquarium. So while it's very easy for us rich folks, or very easy for us within the privileged global south or privileged global north countries to say, we need to stop with aquariums, we need to stop with zoos, the fact of the matter is that there's not a lot of people who are going to have that opportunity, that luxury to see these wild animals. And giving people that chance to see it is probably socially a good thing to do. It's just what we need to do, like what we discussed with the tourism stuff, is to regulate it within those countries and make sure that animals have the best welfare that they possibly can have. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay. You had a question in the back?
Yeah, I just want to know, are there any conservation books that might be getting?
Yeah, I think that was kind of the last question I was going to round up with.
Right.
Thank you for asking that. I think it's really, what can we do now that we've heard about this, and if we want to take part and be part of it, or if someone wants to say, hey, I can't go out there like you doing this every day, but I want to contribute besides money, a bit of time. What can I do? Where can I find these resources?
That's kind of what you're asking, right? Like you want to go out and actually do stuff with turtles, right? There's lots in Malaysia. I would recommend the one that I started my life off with is Jawara Turtle Project. They are on Tioman. It's a voluntourism scheme. So you pay money to volunteer there. They pay for your food, they pay for your accommodation, and you get to help out with the turtle conservation work. So you patrol the beaches at night. If you find a nesting turtle, you report it back, and then you just wait for the turtle to nest. You collect the eggs, put in a hatchery. If there are any turtles that are hatched, you release them out, right? I think another one in Terengganu is Lang Tengah Turtle Project as well. They take volunteers. They take volunteers for like 2 or 3 weeks, and you go out and you kind of rough it out in the jungle. But it's the same thing. You're patrolling the beaches. You're looking for nesting turtles. You can take them up and then put them into a hatchery. So those are just 2 that I know of within Malaysia, right? I know Singapore National Parks has some kind of program. I'm not privy to how you get involved with it. I think if you just do a Google search on National Parks Sea Turtle Volunteering Program, something will pop up. And they have very structured volunteering things, and you can go out and patrol the beaches, and hopefully you'll find a turtle. I don't know how easy, I don't know how hard it is to find a turtle. I remember, so you know the folks that did the documentary Wild City? So when they were doing the marine documentary, I got on a call with the producer because she was trying to ask me, how do I find turtles on the beaches? And I said, oh, you want to do this, you want to do this, you want to try these dates, you want to try these dates. And she said, okay. And then at the end of the call, she was like, finding a pangolin was a lot easier than finding these turtles. Because they just camped out at NTU at night for so long, and they were like, you know what, this is a lot. I think they were out there for like 4 nights with no pangolin. And they were just like, you know what, guys, we're not going to find a pangolin, that's it, it's just not going to make the cut. Last night, they found the pangolin. It just came right to NTU, climbed up the stairs, and went back out into the forest. And they were like, you know, turtles are harder to find than pangolins. So I was like, yeah, it is. So those are just 2 of the organizations. Juwara Turtle Project, that's on Tioman Island, and Lang Tengah Turtle Watch, that's in Terengganu, Malaysia. Okay, those are just 2. There's lots within Peninsula Malaysia. Folks, Malaysian friends, Indonesian friends, if you're watching, put in the chat, let us know your organization to see what kind of volunteerism thing that you guys have, other than just being able to donate money to my friend here in the El Nido Marine Turtle Conservation Network. Yeah, okay? Yeah.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of the conversation. Thank you so much for asking questions and for staying. And also to Rushan, maybe we can give him a round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. Do stay tuned for the next Wild Conversations on our social media page at Wild Space. And also do sign the guest book. I think we have it somewhere. We'll put it up and sign the guest book before you leave. So in the meantime, stay wacky, wild, and curious. And thank you so much. See you next time.
Thank you for the Oh yeah, I am as well. Yeah. This was so the green market one was actually going to be my testing ground for this kind of community people observation thing. Because previously when I told this story, it was the life history of a turtle.